Joining us now, Nick Freitas. Nick is running for Congress in the 7th District. That'll be decided. There's a bunch of people running to be the nominee, the Republican nominee against Abigail Spanberger. That'll be decided in, well, we think a convention, but maybe it's a drive-by, but we're not really sure. Maybe he can clarify it now. Nick Freitas with us. Hey, Nick. Great to have you.
Hey, John. Hey, thanks for having me on, John.
All right, so give us an update now. When is the convention and how is it going to be run?
So 7th District Committee has just put out that the convention is going to be held on July 18th, and that's going to be over at Meadows, which is it's right across from King's Dominion. And they checked, again, I would like to remind everybody on 7th District Committee is a volunteer. And they checked over 29 different locations and looked at a variety of different dates that we could potentially have a physical convention. They've got an arena that can fit over 9,000 people if they need to, even though there's only about 5,000 delegates, a little over that. And so they're doing their best to try to make sure that we have a location that we can practically use. And if for some reason we couldn't have a physical convention in the traditional sense, that space is also big enough to do what they're calling a drive-through convention in order to make sure that one way or another we've got our nominee by July 8th.
Okay, so July 18th is the day. The committee has voted on that. This is a done deal, right? It's not going to move again.
I don't think so. I think that the strategy that they used this time when they looked at this date was, again, ideally we have a physical convention, but if not, they wanted to pick a location. And this is my understanding. I'm not on the committee, but my understanding is they wanted to make something to where we could do either the physical convention or some sort of convention alternative that would, again, guarantee that we could have our nominee by the 18th. So I think we're set up now to know who the nominee is going to be by July 18th, one way or the other.
Okay, so there's two ways to have this convention. One is going to be if there's an all clear by July 18th, you have a convention there. It's in Meadows. Now that's up by, where's that up by?
It's right across from King's Dominion, kind of where they have the state fair, really large fairgrounds, large buildings and whatnot that can be used. So it's somewhat of an ideal location, and it's close to 95, so easy to get to.
All right, so it's by King's Dominion. There's two ways to do this. Either it's all clear and you can get 5,000 people in there, but the chances of the governor allowing that to me seem to be remote. I mean, the guy won't allow you to bring a radio on the beach, so I don't know how you go from that to 5,000 people at Meadows, plus staff, plus workers, plus media. I don't see that happening in any situation. So how does the drive-by work?
So the drive-through, and again, they're releasing all the details on how something like that would potentially work. The way I understand it is essentially you would come up, they would have it organized in such a way to where you could drive up with you or whoever, however many people you can have in your car in order to confirm that you are one of the delegates that has signed up to vote. You would be able to get your ballot, you would be able to fill out your ballot, and then you would be able to drop it off, and then you could leave. They've also got a couple different ideas that they're working on. Again, we have the date, we have the location. 7th District is working on the details for how the drive-through would work. Okay,
well, if you do a drive-through, I'm 100% opposed to ranked voting. I mean, I think if you do a drive-by, they have this thing where you do ranked voting where you put your, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 choices, and then if somebody doesn't get 50 plus 1 in the first ballot, now you're going to whose ever other choices were on the ballot. I think that's fine if you're at a physical convention, Nick, and you're there and everybody's working the floor, and that's kind of the way the process is. But I think to just put on a paper, you're my second choice, you're my third, you're my fourth, you're my fifth, none of the speeches are made. I mean, I just don't think that's a good idea. So is it going to be that kind of thing where it's a ranked voting on the ballot where you have to rank everybody, or can it just be plurality, like, you get 38%, somebody else has got 33%, you win?
Well, one of the whole reasons why they picked the convention was to make sure that whoever our candidate was has 50% plus 1, that they actually have an actual majority as our candidate. And I certainly respect that. The ranked choice ballot is something that they're considering, and obviously that gives you a mechanism to be able to, instead of having to go through multiple ballots, which would be very difficult in a drive-through convention, they still keep that flavor of you getting to rank your candidates and then choose. Again, it's not ideal, and I think everyone acknowledges it's not ideal, but they're trying to come up with a fair, open, and transparent way that carries as many of the characteristics as a traditional convention as possible, given the circumstances. Again, my position has been that it's not for us as a campaign to try to influence or dictate terms of the 7th District Committee. That's the province of the committee, and the committee has been, elected by various GOP committees and SCC chairman and whatnot. So again, whatever they come up with, we're confident that we can win. But I understand the people that want to have a ranked choice ballot in order to ensure that our candidate has 50% plus one. And like I said, I don't think anyone thinks any of this is totally ideal, but we are trying to keep as many of those characteristics of the convention as possible.
So you've got more delegates than everybody else. Every poll that I've seen, the people I've talked to on the inside have said that you have, like, if everybody shows up, you're going to have a plurality, but you might not be over 50%. So what happens if there's a ranked choice ballot? What happens to you? I mean, does that would favor someone else, wouldn't it?
No, not necessarily. It just depends on how many people rank you as their second choice as well. So if somebody has said that, one candidate's my first choice, but this candidate's my second choice, and that first candidate drops off because they're not in the top 2 or 3 or whatever the rules end up being, then your second choice would then be counted if that person is still in the race. And so based off of what we've seen right now, I mean, we're very confident that we're going to win on the first ballot. If we don't, then we're very confident we'll win on the second ballot, because we have out of all the delegates that we've contacted, and again, it's important to remember, none of the delegates are committed to a particular candidate.
Right,
It's more about just who we've communicated with.
Right.
We're confident that either on a first ballot or a second ballot, we would still win. So we're not worried about it. The only thing we've wanted throughout this process is make it open, make it transparent, so nobody's confused about what's going on. And I do think the committee is doing everything it can to try to achieve that.
All right, we're with Nick Freitas. He's running for Congress to take on Abigail Spanberger's 7th District. That'll be decided now at a July 18th convention. For Republicans, this will be either a drive-by, drop-in-the-box type thing, or possibly a regular convention. But again, Nick, I just don't see Governor Northam allowing 5,000 people to go to a convention in July when you can't play your radio on the beach, whatever that means. I guess now the COVID virus spreads by music. Is it a certain type of music? Like I play like old school rock, like 60s rock. The virus probably doesn't do that. Probably contemporary music, right? Like rap or something. But I mean, if I play the Rolling Stones, do I get sick? According to the governor, I do. Can't play the Rolling Stones. So I can't play the Rolling Stones, Beach Boys. Certainly can't play the Beatles. Can't play Grateful Dead. Any of the stuff that I grew up with because I'm older. Can't play any of that because I'll get sick. Right? According to the governor.
I believe you should be free to play whatever music you want. But, again, this shows kind of the contrast in the worldviews and the political philosophy at play here. And it's amazing to watch, Governor Northam and some of the other people in the General Assembly. They just have this – it's almost like, I'm not claiming that they're happy about Corona. They're not. They want to stop it as well. But the thing that I find amazing is I do think they're enjoying all of this power that they're now, imposing on the people of Virginia and really the people across the country. It's this idea of being able to make these decisions, like whether or not you can have a radio or whether or not a beach can open up. Like, why is that a decision that we're making from Richmond at this point? I have no idea. But again, it goes to the idea where if you're someone that is in politics that thinks it's your job to organize society, well, then on something like this, you take full advantage of that because people are afraid. And part of this idea is normalizing this concept to an otherwise free people that, but in a crisis, we just throw out the Constitution, we throw out civil liberties, and all decisions will be made from, quote unquote experts in Richmond or Washington, D.C., who will decide for you what it is that you can do. And by the way, it's for your own safety. And if you disagree with us, you want people to die. And I think people are getting absolutely just tired of it. And the roll-up you gave before the segment was, I think, perfect in demonstrating the contrast between how, like, Florida is operating versus how Virginia is operating. And there's a reason why Governor Northam got an F from the Wall Street Journal. And it wasn't a Democrat-Republican thing. They were going through and objectively looking at how governors have handled the crisis. And what you see with Governor Northam is that it's been about manipulating statistics, manipulating testing. It's been about more and more control, and we're going to run everything from Richmond, and we're not going to allow certain regions to open up earlier. And so, again, it goes down to, if your political philosophy is rooted in the idea that government possesses the ability or the expertise to micromanage everything, well, then you're going to take full advantage of this crisis. And if you're someone that believes that government has a role to play, but that ultimately when you allow free people and entrepreneurs and people to operate and adapt, that you're actually going to get better solutions, well, then obviously you're not going to like what Governor Northam is trying to do right now.
You're right, and it is dictatorial, but look, no Grateful Dead, no Rolling Stones, no Joe Cocker, can't play song. Oh, also no smiling at the beach, because, even though you're at the beach, he wants you to be depressed. For the life of me, I can't figure this guy out. Worst governor worse than I ever thought he could possibly be. Hey, let me ask you a couple policy questions, Nick. Nick Freitas with us. First one is, do you back the construction of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline?
I think that, again, I think pipelines are a good and efficient way to be able to transport, whether it's oil, whether it's natural gas, and all of that can be very, very good for the economy. The one thing that we always want to guard against, right, and have safeguards for, is when it comes to things like eminent domain abuse. And so I think that overall as a concept, it's good. It's really, I don't think it's an either-or proposition where you have to either support it or oppose it. I think it's more of a situation of, look, I can support something, but also want to insist that we're protecting property rights. And I do think we have to do a much better job when it comes to things like this, where you are going to have a lot of people affected by it, and you do have a private company that's the chief beneficiary of it. We saw this in Alaska. My grandfather actually worked on the pipeline up there. And instead of just coming in and essentially confiscating land and giving someone kind of a pittance for what they were taking, they actually allowed them to invest in it, and they became almost like partners with the pipeline. And I think as we look at solutions like that, it's a far more conducive way to be able to construct something like this that respects property rights while at the same time understanding that we need to be able to supply our own energy needs. And when we can do that domestically, that's a positive thing. So, conceptually, I like the idea, but I do think we need to be careful that we aren't, again, resulting in eminent domain abuse and things of that nature.
So when you say abuse, you just want, obviously the government, you have to have eminent domain or you could never put up a road, okay? So we can all agree on that. But you said the word abuse. What you're looking for is fairness and a sense of equity.
Yeah, it's the idea that you don't want to create a situation that we saw with like the Kelo decision in New England, where a private company can come in and say that, well, because the local government or because the state government's going to get more tax dollars from this, we should be allowed to confiscate your land. And you shouldn't create a situation where companies start relying on eminent domain as a first case instead of going directly to property owners and negotiating with them. And so I think that because right now you can get into a situation where a company or an interest can come in and say, well, we're going to use eminent domain, and you can actually drive down property values. And then when you go back to buy the land, well, now it's significantly less than what it otherwise would have been. And I think we can actually put in safeguards and protections to make sure that we're not corrupting the process. Like you said, right, there's legitimate uses.
Right, you don't want to abuse it. No, I get that.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I did the research on this the other day. That's why the question popped in my mind. About 93% of land so far for the pipeline has been agreed to with the landowners. So we're talking about, 5 to 7% basically. All right, Nick, I want to get to the $3 trillion grab bag of liberal crap bill that passed on Friday. I really couldn't believe this. You've got federal voting by mail in this bailout bill, or whatever you want to call it. You've got hundreds of $millions of direct payments to illegal aliens. This is like a goodie bag of every left-wing things I've ever seen. Abigail Spanberger voted in favor of this?
She actually voted against it, but which is good. I'm glad she did that. Here's the problem. It's the question of what was her motivation to do so. Because if you look at a lot of the worst things within this bill, Abigail has voted for those things before. But she didn't vote for it this time. Well, what's the difference? Well, I know we've been calling out Abigail Spanberger for months now, saying that you campaigned one way. You said you weren't going to be a puppet of Nancy Pelosi, but then you vote with her 96% of the time. Elizabeth Warren has a more bipartisan voting record than Abigail Spanberger. And so we've been calling her out on this idea that, look, you told us one thing and then you did something completely different. Well, now you have a situation where she doesn't put out any statement until right before the vote. And you know what happened. She went to Nancy Pelosi. She asked, do you have the votes anyways? Can I vote against this because I have to demonstrate that I'm a moderate? I voted with you 96% of the time. Throw me a bone. And Nancy Pelosi knew she had the votes, and so Abigail Spanberger got to take. She made the correct vote on this one, and she gets to come back and say, "Look, I opposed something the Democrat leadership wanted." But again, what was your motivation? Because as I look at things like the mail-in voting, as I look at things like all these different giveaways, she's voted for all that stuff before. So it's not as if there was some sort of major philosophical shift in what Abigail Spanberger believed. I think she's doing more of what politicians do all the time. They say one thing when they campaign, they get to Washington, they do the exact opposite. An election is a couple months away, a year and a half later, and now it's, okay, I've got to actually give somebody some sort of indication that I didn't completely turn when I got to D.C. So as glad as I am that she took the vote that she did, I don't trust the incentive behind it. I don't think it's a core part of her philosophy. I think it was more her understanding that she's in trouble in the 7th District right now, and she had to come up with something to prove that she's not, voting with Nancy Pelosi 96% of the time, even though that's what she's done the last year and a half.
Nick, what do you think of opening Virginia into phase 1? Do you think we're about on target? Should it be accelerated? What do you think?
I think it should be accelerated primarily because I don't think Richmond should be determining all of this. When I look at the way the government attempts to solve problems, it usually creates new ones, and you see this with Northam's approach and all of these things. I love to see the private sector examples of what's happening with communities helping one another, whether it's Empowering Culpeper, which is a group out here where I live that has been providing food, or it's people like Pete Snyder with their 30-day fund where they've actually come in and provided forgivable loans to small businesses. When you allow private sector people to innovate and help one another, they come up with a lot more effective and efficient ways to do it. When you can try to control all of that from some committee room, you end up with a bunch of meetings, a bunch of conference calls, a bunch of debates, and they have a natural incentive to want to consolidate power and control everything from one area. And it doesn't work. How many times it's tried? This whole central planning approach to everything doesn't work. It doesn't mean the government doesn't have a role to play when it comes to, allocation of medical resources that they have available. But it's amazing to me how many people have called me up and said, Delegate Freitas, what are you doing about this? I said, well, look, I'm a legislator. So personally, these are the things I'm doing. As a legislator, this is what I'm doing. But ultimately, we carry legislation and we allocate. And we allocated the governor back during the veto session. We allocated to the governor all the different federal funds that were coming in order to provide the medical equipment, the supplies. And again, it still wasn't getting to the people that desperately needed it. And what I'm encouraged to see is more people are saying, you know what, I'm tired of waiting on the government. What can I do, or what can I do with other groups in my community in order to make this better? And that's really where the decisions need to lie. It doesn't need to lie with again, Governor Northam and a small cabal of people deciding what Virginia should look like for everybody, because obviously this is affecting different regions in very different ways. And if people in Richmond want to see, food in their grocery stores, well, then they better allow people in rural Virginia to be able to actually produce it and get it to market. So, again, a more decentralized approach, I think, is a much better option of navigating this from both a healthcare standpoint and an economic standpoint.
Final question, holding China accountable. There's the China Accountability Act. Are you in favor of stripping China of their sovereign immunity in the U.S. and freezing the assets of CCC party individuals that have assets in the U.S. over the coronavirus?
Yeah, I tend to be. Because I think we've gotten to a point at this point where China has demonstrated that, and again, when we say China, we need to clarify, and this is something that President Trump has clarified on, not that the media would ever cover it. Our problem is not with the Chinese people. Our problem is with the dictatorial communist regime that regularly lies, tries to use its influence in order to pay off organizations like the WHO, and then constantly engages in corporate espionage against the United States, constantly targets our company in order to steal our products and patents. And I think we need to start recognizing that they're not honest dealers when it comes to trade, when it comes to the way that they conduct themselves around the world and specifically within the United States. And I do think there needs to be some recourse. I mean, look at it this way. If this had originated in the United States and we had violently shut down our press, and we had locked up people that were trying to actually share any information about what was going on. Wouldn't the rest of the world be furious at us? Wouldn't the UN be talking about how bad we were? Wouldn't China be calling for sanctions against the United States? They would be. But it's China doing it, not the United States. And I do think we have a right, and I think our citizens have a right to seek recourse against that, and they are going to need some help and assistance with the United States government in order to do that. And so our entire strategy with respect to China, not just with COVID, but with a whole series of things that they've done over the last several decades, which are illegal and which are in many ways dictatorial and aggressive, we need to reorient our entire relationship with China. And I think the other thing that we need to understand is that we have a lot of allies in that area that have not conducted themselves this way, have been in line with U.S. interests, and we need to be supporting those countries, not finding new ways to prop up a communist regime that really needs to just go away.
Nick Freitas, we're out of time. July 18th, that's going to be the day. Of course, we're going to be there covering it no matter what it is, but likely to be a drive-through type of a convention. Bunch of people fighting to be the nominee against Abigail Spanberger. Full disclosure, I have, not we. I've endorsed Nick Freitas. I think he's the best candidate to go up against Abigail Spanberger. Not taking away anything from the other candidates. I just think Nick would be the best shot that we have. But that's just me. Nick, and I don't live in the district. If I did, I would vote for Nick. And I would single shot it. I just vote Nick. I wouldn't put anybody else down. But that's just me, Nick. John Fredericks Radio Network. More information, go where, Nick?
Go to nick4va.com. The other thing I would tell everybody is every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, we do town halls, and we're on there for an hour or maybe more, and we're almost that entire time we're just taking questions from the audience. So they can go on our Facebook page and watch it. They can go to our website and log on there as well, our YouTube channel. Please ask us questions. There's a lot of confusion going on around with different policy positions, what's going on with the convention. We answer all questions. So please come and join us at 8 p.m. today on our Facebook page, and we look forward to seeing everyone there.